Okay, so first of all, let me just take you through to a few examples. So what you can see here is the Chrome Web Lab. This was only launched about a week ago, and actually probably less than a week ago. And Google have done a little project in conjunction with the London Science Museum to demonstrate the technologies of what HTML5 can do. So let me take you through just to give you an idea of what it does, and then we can have a look at some other aspects in terms of HTML5. Now, first of all, we can see this presentation with music, animation, that's all triggered by itself. And again, there's no Flash here involved whatsoever. The animation is all run using HTML5, and same with the audio. Previously, if you needed sound, you'd need some kind of audio player, and the only audio player that was available was Flash, or Real Player was another one. So let's have a look. Okay, so what we have here is about 5 experiments. So we have the Orchestra, the Teleporter, the Sketchbot, the Data Tracer, and the Lab Tag Explorer. So what you can do is have a look at these later on. I'll just show you one so you can get an idea. So for example, the experiment here which they've got, which is the Universal Orchestra, they've got a whole orchestra that's laid out at the London Science Museum. And from my laptop here, or anywhere apparently from the world, anywhere I am, just by launching Google Chrome, I can control the instruments that are in the London Science Museum. Not only that, I can collaborate with other people around the world and play instruments in real time, that will basically play the instruments so we can actually see what they can do. Okay, so let's launch this up. And if it wasn't for HTML5, this technology wouldn't have been possible. Or if it was possible, it would have been very, very difficult to be able to use these. And I'll show you the technologies in the back end of how it works. And what's happening now is the music, I've controlled which drums I'm going to be playing from here. That's relaying it back at the London Science Museum. It's being played on real instruments at the London Science Museum. Then it's relayed back to me in real time as we're watching here. So let me show you. So it's how this works. So if we skip the tutorial, and we can see other people playing here from Canada, UK, US, Kazakhstan, Argentina, and Canada. And you can record the session simultaneously. And this is all live, as we can see. And you can see all the other aspects that they're also playing. And this is creating a live harmony of music, as we can hear it right now. Okay, so let's have a look at how it works. I'm just going to run you a little video so you can actually see the science behind it. Because I was trying to run the orchestra at the same time as trying to show you the video. So let's go back in here. Has anyone here played with the Chrome Web Lab?
A lot of how we use the web today relies on using real-time collaboration, such as online gaming, working together on a presentation, or making music with your friends across the globe. One way this happens is by using instant two-way communication. Usually, the web works in a system of making a request. For example, clicking a link to a web page, which is then acknowledged and fulfilled by the server in a couple of seconds. However, when you're online gaming or making a video call, this system isn't very effective. Imagine you're playing a game online with a friend, trying to defeat the big bad guy. You send a request to make your character jump, and you wait for the response from the server, by which time the bad guy has defeated you. The modern web supports technologies that allow for instant two-way communication between your computer and the server, allowing data to go backwards and forwards almost instantaneously. Now, when you make your move, your character responds instantly, ensuring the bad guy is no more. This is amazingly useful when it comes to collaborating online, and ensures that if you want to have an impromptu music session with your friends, you're all in perfect harmony.
Okay, and that's essentially what happens in the background there when we were playing the instruments. And I'd recommend you go to the London Science Museum and have a go. They've got some panels there with Google Chrome that you can actually play in real time with other people around the world. Okay, so again here, the browser technology that's available, if I should zoom in. What they're using is one of the HTML5 technologies, and I'll be running through one of the features of HTML5 with you in a minute. But this is using something called WebSockets. What WebSockets does is it creates a pipeline between you and someone else or another party. In this situation, it creates a pipeline between this machine here and the orchestra at the other end. So once we have a pipeline, it's what's called a full duplex, where you can create a two-way communication, or I can send requests, or I can send data, even binary data, or sound, or information. At the same time, I can receive information, a bit like us making a phone call. When I'm making a phone call and speaking to someone at the same time, it's full duplex, because I can say something, at the same time you can say something simultaneously, and I can hear you, and you can hear me. But normally when we have a conversation, it tends to be on a single duplex, or a one-way communication. I say something, and then you wait until you heard what I said, and then you respond. But we could actually have a two-way communication. Computers and themselves can have a two-way communication. That's exactly what's happening here. And the hub that's in the middle that's controlling this is a very, very new technology, which is Nodejs, which is a server-based JavaScript. Ryan Dahl has kind of taken the V8 engine, which is the JavaScript engine from Google Chrome, and taken that out from a client-side technology and placed that on the server. And this allows you to use HTML5 tech, or HTML5 technology, like for example the WebSockets, also on the server, so you can communicate at the other end in real time. And as the video suggested, you can then use it for collaboration, you can use it for gaming, or any kind of real-time communication that you need to do with any other person or any group of people elsewhere around the world. So in itself, it's very, very powerful. Let's have a look at a few other. So this is one example. I want to show you another example, which is, I don't know if you've ever heard of the website, which is the FWA Awards. Think of it like the Oscars for websites, and they've been selecting the best websites around the world and demonstrating them and competing them. So looking through this, I found a website that you'll probably be interested in, which is called Black Negative. And this is a great example of how HTML5 is used in real life situations. So if I turn that one on, so you can have a look at it. Again, it's loading. Now this uses, as well as just an example here where I'm just using the trackpad, this will work on the iPad, and it's also uses touch. So you can drag between the different situations by dragging left to right. And as you can see, I've got here full screen video. Again, there's no flash involved in it at all. And as I resize the browser, the video will resize to it. So if I just turn it off from here and resize, you'll notice that the video will also resize in scale with the browser. So it doesn't matter if I'm viewing this on a full 2 times HD or 4 times HD monitor, or I'm using it on Retina displays, or I'm using it on a small iPhone or an old iPhone. It doesn't really matter. It will scale accordingly and the video will play accordingly. Also, the sound is full audio in HTML5. There's no plugins involved, so the amount of processing that's involved in terms of the processor with playing the video is slimline in terms of what it can do. So let me just put it into full screen so you can have a look. Okay, so this is one example. And again, you've got these animations that are all triggered. These are CSS3 animations, which falls underneath the category of also HTML5. Because HTML5 has become a bit of an umbrella in terms of growing beyond just the original spec of it being tag-based like HTML4 or XHTML. But it now encompasses CSS technologies and also JavaScript in that respect. There's a lot of JavaScript APIs that are now included as part of what HTML5 is, that gives you the ability of behaviors, as we can see here when we mouse over, to trigger events. Okay, so here's another example, and again, this is fully scalable. We've got videos and images that scale, and this is another technique or another term that you might have heard of, which is something called responsive web design. It doesn't really matter what size your screen is. It doesn't really matter whether you're viewing it on a mobile phone or a tablet or a desktop, or even you've got monitors now on points of sale outside shops. For example, if you go to Korea, we walk down the street and actually shop displays are monitors or are browsers in themselves. Billboards are browsers. So design one website that would work for all, and this is an example where it would work depending. It doesn't really matter where it is. And again, here's some examples. And again, I'm interacting with it with a mouse, and as I move over, it's showing more and more of this. Now, if you wanted to create something like this in the past, you could have done, but you would have had to do it in Flash. It would have been heavy. You would have had to do a preloader, and you have to have the right version of Flash, and then it wouldn't work on mobile, wouldn't work on iPad, and to some extent you could have made it scalable. But you've got a lot more flexibility with HTML5 because it's just taking it to another level as well. So again, if we right click here, we can see that there's no flash involved in terms of that. We've got full video, full animation that allows us to create what we need to create. Okay, so again, it's worth looking to see, and again we've got mouse track movement, okay, which is another API that's been included inside HTML5. So you can use it with gaming, for example, which in a lot of cases you need to track the mouse exact movements. Okay, so this is an example where they've used it to illustrate what HTML5 can do. So let me just show you I'll go to Pinterest, which I've got it here. And this is a great example here of showing you what HTML5 is. Because initially, the WG group had specified in terms of what HTML5 needed to be. And they started off by redesigning the HTML5 markup, the tags, the specs in terms of what HTML5 is. And they've introduced some semantic tags into HTML5, which basically makes websites, rather than, or the HTML itself, its structure, more language orientated. So when you're looking for something, like for example for search engine optimization, it becomes a lot easier for a search engine like Google or intelligent browsers for them to pull the information out. Like one of the things that they've added is adding the article tag or the section tag or defining what is a navigation. And by using that, you can then identify certain elements within your HTML page that you can then use it. Also, they've added a few other aspects. They've added drag and drop, because we've always wanted to add drag and drop to our websites. And previously, the only way you could have added that drag and drop was using a JavaScript framework like jQuery. But jQuery in itself is heavy, because the browser has to go in and process the jQuery, understand the JavaScript, and then relay it back. Whilst if you have that as native built into the actual browser itself, there's very little thinking power that's involved for you to be able to process it. And again, I'll be showing you examples of how the drag and drop work. So we've got the WebSockets, which we saw an example of. Web workers, which is basically how you can get the browser to think independently of the rendering. So say for example, I could be showing you this presentation here, and in the background I could be doing something else, like for example processing an image or recording something. So you know, like in Photoshop, if you try to add a big massive blur to an image and your computer just halts and slows down and stops, normally if you've got like dual core or quad core processing, you can assign one of the processors to do the processing whilst you carry on. So multitasking in some respect. So with web workers you can actually create the multitasking effect quite effectively. You've also got now audio and video natively within the browser itself, and web messaging. So I can send messages directly from one client to another using this effect. And we've got Canvas. And the idea with Canvas is this allows you to render directly on a pixel by pixel basis onto the screen, so that you can control it, very similar to how Flash works. So you can create animations or show graphics in terms of what you want. And that was the initial design concept that they wanted to do with HTML5, and it's kind of grown since then. And then when the WG group took on the HTML5 spec, they decided to add another few features. Like for example, they added WebSQL, and what WebSQL is, you can actually create an entire database locally onto your machine. Okay, and then you can sync that on the server as well. You've got web storage, which means you can use, rather than, because all we've had in terms of storing information on our machines from a browser technology is using cookies. And cookies, the problem with cookies is there's a limit to them. You've only got 4 kilobytes of size. It's not enough. In terms of technologies that we use nowadays, we need more than 4 kilobytes. And now with web storage, you can have up to 5 megabytes. And Google are now working on technologies of extending this beyond 5 megabytes. But obviously you'd need to get the consent of the user. And using some clever browser management, it will work with that. The spec itself, HTML5, is not finished. What we see here is just the beginning. Because with HTML5, it's due to be finalized 2014. The W3C, which is the body that's looking after HTML5, now received funding and sponsorship from Adobe and Microsoft in terms of finalizing the spec for HTML5, and it will be released in 2014. Recently, the WG group, which was in conjunction with W3C, have now split, and they've realized that it's a continual project. You can't finalize what we've just started, which is HTML5. What we've started is a revolution of technology, a revolution of the internet. And I'll just show you a chart in a second of what I mean by a revolution. And because we've started this revolution, there's a continual need for process and development in terms of adding additional features. And this isn't going to stop. And it's predicted that you won't see, at the moment, whenever there's a revolution of technology or a revolution of anything, you see a spurt of growth or spurt of interest. And it's growing at an exponential rate at the moment. And we won't see this decline until predicted probably about in 10 years' time, in 2022. So we'll probably still see an additional features that are being added. So this is just the beginning in terms of what is available. What's also been added or falls under the umbrella of HTML5, but isn't really HTML5 as such, but when people say I need a HTML5 developer or I need my website to become HTML5, which is like the example that we saw, it isn't just what we see in this blue circle here, but covers all these aspects that is around us. For example, we've got CSS3, okay, which is a new advent of what CSS can do, databases, media capture, and I'll show you, for example, examples of augmented reality, which is now being added into the HTML5 spec. Okay, media capture, where you can capture video from a mobile phone camera, or you can capture it from a webcam on a laptop, for example. File API, and this is basically that allows you to store and save files onto this machine, or I can access files from this machine. And this is very useful for this. One of the reasons that HTML5 has kind of taken place is that there's always been a need, ever since HTML has been around, is that we're moving towards mobile. And by us moving towards mobile, we're looking at technologies, how we can use these technologies on a device that we carry with us. And with mobile devices, now with smartphones, they're all HTML5 compliant, and I'll show you some charts that are involved with that. They take the ability of being able to show you the results in terms of a lot of the aspects of what's available. For example, in terms of animation and video, they can render effectively on the devices as they are. Okay, so as you can see, there's a lot of technologies that have been added into the HTML5 spec, and yet it's still growing. For example, like touch events, for example, like accessing the calendar within your phone, and so on and so on. So let me just take you on and show you another example. If we go here, and this is another example that Google have done, which is the evolution of the web. I don't know if you've seen this website, but it's definitely worth looking at. Okay, they've redesigned it with the new release of Google I/O. And this whole animation here is done using HTML5 or HTML5 associated technologies. And we can see how the web has evolved over the years. And if we go back to the beginning, we can see that a lot of the evolution of the web has been associated with browsers, or the browsers that we use. For example, we started off with Netscape, or Mosaic browsers to start off with, then we had Netscape and Internet Explorer, and from there we could see that HTML and then cookies and then JavaScript and Flash came in, and the need for new and additional technologies kind of came in. And around about 2005, Ajax started to become very popular with the XML HTTP request, and this allowed you to asynchronously update results on your page without needing to go to the server. One of the biggest examples that really did this properly was Google Maps, because when we use, I don't know if you tried a mapping service prior to Google Maps, it's painful. Street Map was one of them that I used to use on a regular basis. But you used to visit a map, and then you click on, say for example you wanted to go east, you click on the east, or the icon that's to the east, and it will send a request to the server, and then it'll come back, and then the page loads, and then you were on like a really slow connection. It will take forever. But now Google Maps is quick, responsive, because it updates as you're viewing it. And as this example, as I click here, it's showing me the results, what's on next. So from here, this has kind of pushed us towards the next aspects. And only since really that Safari came in with the WebKit browser, it was one of the very first that really introduced the HTML5 technology. But the first browser to really launch HTML5 was Firefox 3.5, which is around here. And this is when a lot of the new HTML5 technologies were around. Before that, it was all experimental. And you could see that in the Safari nightly builds and the Firefox nightly builds. And what nightly builds are developer releases that you can actually download and have a look at them before it's actually released in full stable effect. But what we see here is, and these bands are the different technologies that are coming. And as we progress over time, around about 2008 and 2009, it's just gone absolutely haywire. And we can see, if I just close this, we can see that technologies, let's turn, that's better. We can see a lot of the technologies have gone absolutely nuts because they've evolved and they're starting to become a lot more mature in terms of what they can deliver. And you're starting to see a lot more websites that are using these features. And you've probably noticed it, that a lot of the websites are changing over time. And there's two reasons for this. And this is mainly because of mobile. And the other reason is because we're moving away from the aspect of having a website as a website where we use it as an information base. We used to, like for example, in the early days of the web, we used to visit a website to retrieve information. Use it like you would use it as a book. For example, I want to know information about a certain company. I visit that website, I read it, or I print it, and then I look at it, and then I go away. But now when we process websites, or how we use websites, we don't do that anymore. We interact with them at a very high level. Websites are no longer websites, but they're applications. And this is one of the reasons, again, that HTML5 has evolved to what it is today, is because the need for us to interact at a very high level. And this is, again, if we look at Facebook, or look at Twitter, or look at any other social media application that we've got, we don't go there just to read information. We go there to interact, socialize. So Facebook wouldn't be what it is today if we just went there to read what other people were doing. But we're adding information. We're adding comments, we're adding videos, we're adding pictures, we're tagging this or doing that. And by doing so, and everyone else is doing that, collaborating in terms of being able to produce what we are able to produce. So we're no longer just consumers, but we're also creators, we're publishers. We develop and integrate into the actual web itself. And the web has evolved from what used to be just static websites to fully dynamic, interactive, rich websites. And in a lot of cases, this has been because, and again, let me show you this example that we have here. And the web has really changed over time, and it's grown exponentially. And the web only started 20 years ago, so it's relatively young when you think about it. Because if you look at other industries, and it's been calculated that the web industry itself is growing at a rate of seven times the rate of traditional industries. If you look at medicine or engineering, for example, the amount of technologies that are coming out is moving at a very, very fast rate, and that rate in itself is increasing, and it's increasing at an exponential rate. And one of the reasons for this is because of demand, drive. Okay, and if we look back when the World Wide Web had started, the numbers were big, but in terms of what they are now, is very, very little. So there's two bands here. We can see that one band is the number of users, and the other band is the amount of data that's available on the web. We can see that in the 90s the number of users has started to increase, and as you can see, the increase is increasing, which means that it's exponential and it's rising. So if we just move across, and it gets to a point where the amount of data that's on the internet, or the amount of data that's available on the web, is increasing exponentially. Actually, the rate of increase of the amount of data that's on the web is increasing more than the number of users that there is. Just to put it into scale, there's 20 hours of video that's being uploaded to YouTube every minute. That it's just impossible for you to be able to watch everything that's on YouTube. It's impossible. And that's just one example, just one form of media that's available on the website. So the way, again, as I said, because of this change that's happening, the way we access the internet and the way we work with it is changing. So for two reasons. A is because of the way we process websites is now becoming more application-based. And the other reason is because the way we accessing it as well is through mobile or tablets. And it's a device that we carry with us all the time. And because it's a device that we carry with us all the time, we use it very, very differently than we use a tablet. We tend to use a technique or a method that's studied as data snacking, where you process information in small chunks rather than taking it all at once. And this is an example of that. And again, we can have a look at some other stats. And one of the reasons, which is looking back at this example, which is browsers and technologies, we can see that this has also been possible because of the advent of browsers. And we can see that one of the pushers and really advocates of HTML5 has been Google. And we can see down here at Chrome, if I can zoom in, probably see it down here. And with Chrome, what you can see is releases that are a lot more frequent than any other browser that you see. They've actually got the release cycle down to 6 weeks. Every 6 weeks, you will see a new update to Google Chrome. And for every new release that comes out, new features are available. Like, for example, the Google Chrome version I'm using is Google Chrome Canary. It's 2 versions ahead of the current version that's out today. And by doing so, I can actually access and work with these additional features. One of the features that I'll be showing you, which is still experimental, which is augmented reality within the browser itself, and actually using it as a medium to interact with the device. Okay, so from there, the growth is still growing, as we can see. So let's have a look at some other stats. So if we go to gs.statcounter, and just going to change this to all data. Okay, and what we see here is quite a dramatic move that's been happening over the last couple of years. And at one point, Internet Explorer used to have about 92% dominance with web browsers. Nearly everyone used to use Internet Explorer. Because to be honest with you, Internet Explorer was probably the best browser at the time, back in 2001 when Internet Explorer 6 came out. You couldn't beat it. It was the best browser there was. And it gave us ability in terms of being able to create what we use as Ajax today. If it wasn't for that, we probably wouldn't be here today. But unfortunately, with Internet Explorer 6, a lot of people stuck with Internet Explorer 6 and didn't move on. And unfortunately, we can't live in yesterday's times. We have to move forwards. And the evolution of the browser from Internet Explorer 6, and it was down to partially a fault with Microsoft in terms of them not deciding to follow a path of what the W3C had set, which is following standards. And other browsers have decided to follow standards instead, being Firefox, WebKit, Safari and Chrome. But now Microsoft with Internet Explorer 9 have decided to follow standards. And we can see here there's been a decline of users of Internet Explorer over time. And we had an increase in Firefox. Up until Google Chrome came along, and as we can see here with Google Chrome, ever since its inception, we can see that it's been growing at an exponential rate to a point now it's overtaken both Firefox and Internet Explorer, and it is the #1 browser that there is. It's another thing about Chrome as well, compared to other browsers. So other browsers, for example, what you needed to do is download a new version, install it. But who does this nowadays? Actually, there's a study done recently that about 45% of users don't like to upgrade software because of one reason or another, because it might break my machine or something along the reason. So if you don't give them the option, but just make it auto-update, then you take that worry out completely. And that's one thing that Chrome did initially, is they decided not to go ahead and release new versions where the user has to then go and download a newer version of the browser every time they release a new version, because that will be a nightmare. Every 6 weeks, imagine that, trying to download a new version of the browser. It's just not doable. So what they've done is they've added the feature within Google Chrome, and it basically, every time you relaunch, there you go, it's just updated my browser. I didn't even know it was asking to update my browser. And so I've got, basically, I'm using Google Canary, which updates it every day. So every day they add new features or test it. But every 6 weeks on the traditional release, it will automatically check to see if there's a new version every time you launch the browser, every day. And if there is a new version, it will, when you shut down the browser and relaunch it again, you'll basically have the new version. So a lot of cases, you'll be on the latest version without even realizing that you're on the latest version. At one point, I was using Google Chrome, and then I thought I'd look to see what version it was, and I was on version 21. How did that happen? And that was because, and then I checked it. That came out like 4 days ago. I don't remember updating it, because it automatically updates from where it is. And this is very, very powerful, because you can then introduce new features to users without them realizing that they're using these new features. And you can introduce new features dynamically. And we're seeing this common aspect again on phones. Android is one of those, and I think Apple is starting to roll this out. But for example, we've got the official Google Android phone, and with the Android phone, it auto updates. You walk down the street and it's saying needs to restart the phone because it'll auto update. So you don't really need to download and install software anymore, because the feature is automatically updating. So let me just show you another few examples that we have here. Okay, so again, I've got this on my Pinterest, so you can follow me to see what all the slideshows that we've got. And it's recorded, so you can actually see all this. But HTML5 again has been having a lot of buzz. But what's all the buzz about? We can see now that about 48% of developers are already using HTML5, and one in 5 of the top 10,000 websites are now HTML5 compliant. So, and it's a growing trend. If you look at the growth rate, and again I can show you this later, we can see that there's a growing demand, and before any time soon it'll be 80%, and probably within 5 years you'll have about 100% of developers developing in HTML5. Okay, and again we've got 49%. Again, we're looking at US mobile users prefer to use the browser versus native apps. This is changing. Okay, it used to be the case with iPhones and Androids, where you need to download and buy an app from an app store. But this process is changing, because instead of downloading an app from an app store or the Play Store, if you visit a website through your mobile phone and that behaves like an app, then you wouldn't need to download and install an app. So the process of building applications as websites rather than natively for iPhone, again, there's another advantage here. You can actually build it once and it will work on the Android, work on iPhone, and work on any other smartphone that you do have, because it is essentially a website. And you can have it working on your desktop as well. We can also see here why HTML5 is becoming a lot more popular, because Internet Explorer 6, 7, and 8 is not HTML5 compliant, and as you can see it's dropping, and it's at 28%, okay, whilst all the other browsers are compliant. We can see here the future of HTML5. Okay, by 2015, 80% of all mobile apps will be based wholly or in part of it as HTML5. Okay, and this is basically looking at the App Store itself, or the Android Play market is moving away from it being native apps, that they're becoming more mobile applications, websites that are behaving as mobile applications. We can see that 79% of mobile app developers plan to implement HTML5 in the near future, and these are companies that have already decided to go down a mobile web app directly. Financial Times, for example, if you visit the ft.com, it's basically a full mobile application that you can visit from your website. Again, Ford and Vimeo have also done the same. And again, there's all the links that are available there. Now we can see, if we go back here and we look, not this one, if we look over here, mobile versus desktop, we can see that there's another trend happening. And we can see that we've got, this is desktop use, how we use the internet. And majority of us around the world are using the web through our desktop machine, as I am here. And then this is mobile usage. There's more and more people now accessing the internet via mobile. And this is growing at a rate of, it's doubling every 6 months. And it's growing at exponential rate, that is predicted within the next 5 years that you'll have more users that access the web through a mobile device, and this is including tablets, than you would on a desktop machine. We're in a post-PC era where it used to be the case that 5 years ago you walk into any home or an average home, the chances are you'll find a PC in the living room or one of the rooms there, or maybe more than one. 5 years from now, you walk into an average home, the chances are you probably won't see a PC, but you'll probably see a tablet, or definitely a mobile phone, that is a device that is HTML5 compliant, that you can access the internet through. So we're changing. And again, if you look at the iPad 3, the processing power in the iPad 3, or the latest Samsung Galaxy S3, is more powerful than my desktop PC at home. It's got a quad-core graphics card. It's got more pixels than my monitor, 23-inch monitor that I've got. So it's moving towards that direction. We need to start adopting and changing and building for these directions to be able to affect these. So let me show you a slideshow. And this is a slideshow, again, developed by Google, which is it's called HTML5wow.com. And again, this is all built in HTML5. Okay. So it's using the WebKit, which is again part of the Google Chrome. It uses Webgl. Webgl is basically 3D rendered graphics on a browser. And we're using file APIs and web audio. So let's have a look. So I'll just turn this one off. Okay, so this is a showcase to see what it does. Again, it's Tareq Bidelman and Arne Ruman. And again, you can watch this. It's recorded on YouTube, so you can see the whole lecture in itself. Okay, that's them there. Okay, and they kind of bring up something here that any of you that are looking to get into HTML5 is probably the #1 skill set to have worldwide. If we have a look at Indeed.com job trends, this basically is a research on different jobs, whether it's HTML5 or a pharmacist. and find trends, you can see what trends that are available. So it's not only on IT, it's in general. Okay, we can see that the #1 skill set in demand in the world is HTML5. Okay, and it's not slowing down either. It's growing at such a rate that nearly every website in the world needs to be HTML5, and every website from now onwards needs to be in HTML5. There isn't enough people around the world to do this job. So it's such a huge demand. You can also see what's also in demand. We can see that iOS, Android, mobile app, and jQuery are in the top 10. Okay, so if you have a combined skill set and you can actually build mobile applications in HTML5 for Android and iOS, then you're a winner. So it's an extremely powerful technology to have, because as we saw from that chart, it's not just learning a set of tags like it was with HTML4 or XHTML, but it's a whole plethora of technologies that gives you the ability to create rich, dynamic, interactive websites. Okay, so here's what they're going to show you some examples. Now we're going to get a little bit technical. We're going to show you some JavaScript to show you how these work. Okay, so the first one, which is basically using the file and the file API that it introduced new. Okay, which basically allows you to store and save data locally onto your machine, whether it's a mobile phone or not. Okay, and here's an example of what you'd need to do. What does it let you do? Imports from the file system or the web. So basically I can have files on my machine, I can use them within that. I can store it. So basically I can, say for example, if I'm building a mobile app and I get disconnected from the internet, I can carry on using the app whether I'm still connected or not. Okay, because it can store the data there locally, and then I can still, say for example, whether it's a Facebook app or a Twitter app, I can actually view all the content even if I'm not connected to the internet. But it's just cached, and then the second I connect back to the internet, it resyncs with the database live using again HTML5 technology like WebSocket, and then it can update the results that we can see here. Okay, so see, here's an example of how this is all new in terms of what HTML5 can do. So we can actually read information from the file itself whilst we select them. So I can actually work with images. So we can actually specify, and if we look at the HTML from here, if I press cancel, we can see that the input type file, we can say only accept images and allow multiple. Okay, again, this is all new to HTML5. So I'm now going beyond the browser, outside of the browser, and if I select more than one image, which is new in HTML5, and click open, it can read, I'm not uploading the information, it can read the information about the image before uploading it. Okay, so the user can then decide whether they need these images or not. Okay. You can also select a directory, a whole directory for example, and select it, and it can upload and show you the aspects of what's inside that directory if you need to. And again, there's the script from that. Oh, it's not moving to the next one. Okay, you can also drag images directly from the desktop onto my machine. And I've seen this on a few websites. For example, if I go to images.google.co.uk and say for example I need an image, so if I come down here, let's find an image. Actually, if we take this image here, okay, and go to Google Images, and I drag this and drop. Okay, so I'm interacting from outside of the browser, and dropping it in there, whether it's an image or a video or a collection of files. It doesn't really matter. Okay? I can drag and drop and interact, and it can actually do some searches from there. Okay, and again, it's just a simple bit of code that allows you to create that effect from there. And there's a really great example from that, which we have this example that combines this with Webgl 3dfile.io. And I discovered this today. Okay, which basically, if you're if you work with 3D, like for example, you work with 3D Studio Max or Maya or AutoCAD, you've got some 3D models and renderings that you want to share and show other people. It's very difficult to get them to see the end result unless it's not something you can print. So you can't print a 3D model unless you've got a 3D printer. So how do you show them the illustration that you've created? And this is an example where you can do that, where you basically drag and drop the file that you created onto here, and it will render it for you in full 3D. So here's an example of something that's been uploaded. And again, as you can see, this is in full 3D using Webgl, allowing me to control and work with that image. So we're using two aspects here. So we're using the drag drop aspect, and we're using the file API to access the information from the outside, and we're using the Webgl 3D to be able to interact with it. Again, the JavaScript allows us to interact and give us options to control it. I can control the light intensity, and I can control this. Okay. Whether this was a 3-story building or the Eiffel Tower, it can be just dragged and dropped straight onto there. And then you can also hide certain parts. For example, hide this part and hide this part. So I can actually see the mechanics behind it, which is great if you're an engineer or an architect or something that's built, even 2D diagrams. You can just basically give them that, copy that link, email them that link, and then they can open it up in any modern browser, and then they'll be able to see this in full 3D glory, full 3D as we can see here. Okay, so we have a photo gallery here. Okay, so if I load now this is a zip file saved on the browser. So I'm going to click the load photo zip. The progress bar is loading. It's unzipping it, and then it's showing me the images. Okay, so there's a lot that's going on in the background. I'll show you what actually happens in the background. So if we view the output and do this again, and this is exactly what's happening in the background. This is using the web workers that we were saying that the browser does something in the background without me realizing that it's doing this. So to the end user, it seems all seamless and very quick and very responsive, but there's a lot that's going on in the background. Again, as you can see, these animations, and I'm using the keyboard to navigate between it. Okay, so let's have a look at how this one works. And we can see it's using the web workers to uncompress the zip file in the background. It's using the array buffer to move between the responses, so everything's happening in real time. The progress is a HTML5 element, that progress bar, that was being updated in real time, and then the animations and the effects that were added to the images were CSS3 transitions. So by combining all of these together, we can use it to create an effect or an application that can be used in real time, as an example. Okay, so let's have a look at using files. Now you can asynchronously read file from the memory. So basically you can add data to the memory and read it simultaneously. So this basically, from a user's perspective, means that the information will be read a lot quicker. There's a lot less lag and a lot less delay in terms of the content that you've got. And data URLs. Blob URLs, again, I won't worry about that. Okay, and again, the kind of support that's around in File API is becoming a lot more apparent. There's more and more browsers that support it. If you ever want to know which browsers support which technologies, what you can do is visit this website here, which is HTML5 test.com. By visiting HTML5 test, it will test to see what your browser supports. Okay, and as you can see, the score here now is 500 points. I remember visiting this a few weeks ago and it was 450. A few weeks before that was 400, and a few months ago it was like 350. Okay, and it's 500 now, but I'm sure a few weeks down the line it'll be 550, because it's continuously developing and there's more and more features that are being added. And if we have a look, so this is Google Chrome, which is scoring at 442 plus 13 bonus points, and we can see all the features that it's supported. Okay, and it's quite a fair amount of features that there is, and you can kind of compare this with other browsers as well. So for example, if we look at other browsers, so why Google Chrome, and why is Google Chrome so popular? And we can see here, I'm using 442, which is the Chrome Canary, but we can see Chrome 20, which is the official release that's out, is 414. And then you've got Firefox, Safari, and Internet Explorer 9, which is at 138. So even Microsoft, with their latest release, is still lagging behind, but yet they've got Internet Explorer 10 coming out, which is 319. So still about 120, 130 features less than the current browser that I'm using. So it's a good idea, but it doesn't mean that the race is over. Things are still happening. And we can see here the evolution of browsers in terms of features. Remember that chart that we were looking at in terms of the number of users and the amount of data that's available? It's growing at an exponential rate. The number of features that's available to browsers is also growing at an exponential rate. And it'll probably carry on growing at an exponential rate probably for another 10 years. It'll start to tail off towards then. But here's Chrome, which is winning the race at the moment in terms of feature compatibility, and you can see the release cycles that are available. You can see this also in tablets. Okay, you can compare tablets as well. And again, here's the evolution of browser releases in tablets with their features. Okay, and again you've got BlackBerry tablet, which is at 373. Chrome, which is now available on the iPad and iPhone, okay, which is scoring quite high. Okay, and also mobile phones, okay, which again Chrome scores quite high on mobile devices. Again, you can see the chart there from the bottom. So it's becoming apparent. And another website that I tend to use on a regular basis, which is Can I Use? Because as a web developer, you need to know what you can use and what you can't use. Say, for example, I want to use video. If I do use video, what would happen? Because if we look at this, we can see that all browsers support video, apart from Internet Explorer 7 and 8. Okay, so 1 in 4 web designers now stopped support for IE6. So if it doesn't work in IE6, forget it. Okay, and now more and more web designers are dropping support for IE7. Actually, there's one website in Australia that added the 7% tax. Basically, if you're using Internet Explorer 7, they'll add 7% to whatever you're buying, unless you upgrade your browser. And you're starting to see a lot of trends moving towards that, which is quite funny. So we can see here that if I do decide to use video, I'll only be able to deliver to 76% of users. So 24% won't be able to see this video. So you have to offer an alternative technology. So we're in that transition stage where Flash is, I'm not saying Flash is dead, far from it. Flash is alive, and because there's a lot of people that still use Flash. And for example, for video, Flash will still be available for a couple of reasons. DRM, digital rights management, is very effective in terms of Flash video. But the problem is, if you do have something that's Flash video and you're viewing it on an iPad, it's not going to work. So you have to kind of make that decision. So a lot of cases, for example, if you're offering video, you tend to offer it in two formats, both HTML5 video and Flash video. And this allows you to show it in HTML5 if you can. If it can't, then show it in Flash. But there will be a point where there's no point, okay, because the number here is increasing, or the number of users that don't have Flash is decreasing. We can do a browser comparison, for example. If I want to compare the version I'm using, version 22, with the version which is Internet Explorer 6, and we can see the number of features that's available compared one to another, okay, which makes you think, as a web designer, why would I ever want to design for Internet Explorer 6 when I can design for something like this? Because I'll have to design a website that's stripped out of all of these features, okay, which becomes a burden, becomes very difficult for you to be able to design as a web designer or a web developer. Okay, so if we carry on, okay, to the file system API. Okay, so this allows you to save somewhere locally onto your machine, so you can access it. Okay, and this is here an application built completely in HTML5. And I can make a directory. So, for example, I can drag and drop. Okay, and I've added the file. Okay, and then you can list that file if you need to. Again, it's not as widely supported, but it's starting to become a lot more supported. I just want to move on because we're running out of time. So one thing that they've added as well in HTML5 is, for the first time ever, that for graphics, for example, you could only have graphics as bitmap graphics, like for example JPEGs, GIFs or PNGs. But for you to have full scalable graphics, like vector graphics, like in Adobe Illustrator or in EPS, it just wasn't possible. But now you can, as SVG. SVG has been around for a while. One of the first people that developed it was Adobe, but it really wasn't used because browsers didn't support it. But now SVG is a browser spec. Modern browsers now understand SVG. So I can have a fully scalable image that basically, this is a GIF, for example, or a PNG, and this is a vector. And if I zoom in to any of these, as you can see, I'm zooming in, and I can start to see the pixels in an image, but I can't see the pixels on this. And a good example of this is if we look at a lot of images in Wikipedia are now SVG. And if we go to this website, Emacs for Mac OS X, and I visit this website, and this website here is fully rendered in vector. So if I view this in a Retina display on a new MacBook Pro, or if I view this on an iPad 3, okay, the resolution will be as crisp as it is on my monitor as it is on theirs. Okay, and the nice thing is it's fully scalable. So if I scale this up to a resolution that's 6 times HD, it will be exactly as is. You won't lose any resolution whatsoever. And now Illustrator CS6, you can design your illustrations in vector and export them as SVG if you need to, which gives you that ability. Okay, again, you can incorporate your SVG with text. So here's an example that you can include this as part of your HTML, so that I can add some text and I can modify that text or have that text fed in through a database. And then I can actually have my text selectable on a line. Okay, and the advantage of that is because it's part of the DOM, part of the HTML itself, document object model, is that that text itself is not an image, it's searchable by Google. Okay, so it will give you your SEO, your search engine optimization. Okay, and also if you wanted to add any kind of canvas or animation, I could animate this quite easily using JavaScript and any other methods and techniques that are available. Okay, and then a whole load of things with CSS. CSS3 has changed a lot and is continuously changing. Again, Google I/O, which was only on a few weeks ago. We've got a few lectures, and Alex Russell, one of them, was explaining about all the new changes that are happening to CSS, and that's due to change yet again. The sort of things that you can do is you can do a border radius, transformation, custom fonts, okay, text overflow. You can customize border images, text outline, gradient, box shadow, text shadow, and so on and so on. Okay, and that's just some of the things that you can do with CSS. Really, it's given us a whole platform of visualization that wasn't available prior to CSS3. Okay, you can create movement. This is an example done in CSS3. Okay, I'm animating an image and spinning it, and just this is the text that's needed to do that. Okay, and again you can do tweens. For example, this is a tween. Again, I can change this to a linear. I can change this to ease in. Okay, so you can completely customize it how you want just by playing around with these values. Okay, 3D transformations in CSS. So I can transform in full 3D. Okay, so this is transforming it in this method, which is basically X, and this is Y, and combination of the two. So here's an example of something that using animation with 3D transformations in 3D for CSS. And bearing in mind, this is not Webgl, this is just CSS in itself. You can use Canvas, which basically you can use it as a drawing platform for changing values using JavaScript to manipulate the pixels that you see on the screen. So if you want full rendered 2D graphics or 3D graphics, you can use the Canvas for that. And again, you can track the animation from there. Okay, this is the old method. Okay, and this is the new method. This is the time here. The higher the better, 50 milliseconds. Okay, and it's reading it at 20 Hz. Here's a 2D animation that you can create. I had this one working this morning. Okay, but basically you can create a 2D animation where you have one image with different characters, and then you can get this one animating. Oh, there you go. Okay, so if you wanted to create games or 2D sprites, you can easily do them. And then 3D support. And this is again using device orientation. I'm using a laptop here. It's got an accelerometer, and as I turn my laptop in any direction, so I'm dragging it and it's controlling it. And you can have that on a phone as well, because on smartphones you have the accelerometer that you can control. Okay, you got Webgl. Okay, this is in full 3D. Okay, and as I move my mouse, it gives me the animations. Here's an example of a Webgl animation. So you can get full rendered 3D visuals using the browser. Here's another one. Type in 3D. Again, this is in full 3D. And audio as well. So I can actually load an image, load an MP3 on there, and it can play it directly from there if I need to. Now, they've introduced something else which is called the Web Audio API. And one of the first people that had introduced this is Mozilla, which means that I can use JavaScript to generate sound directly within the browser. So if I wanted to create a Moog player, or if I wanted to create a synthesizer within the browser, I could do that. So I could or if I wanted to build the next production studio directly from an application, I can visit a website and build sound systems using that. So how can we use this? For example, this is so if I wanted to create a sine wave, okay, you probably remember that from days of physics. Okay, but this is generating it live from the browser itself. This is not a recorded sound. So again, if I have dials with these, I can actually control that. Like, you can build dials in there. Actually, I did come across, I can't remember the link now, but I did see a demo where somebody had built like 4 different dials and you can tweak them. So if you wanted to build an online DJ system, okay, that you can actually tweak and play around with the sounds, you could do that directly from the browser. You all remember HAL from
Good afternoon, gentlemen and ladies. I am a DAL 9000 computer.
So what's happening here is the sound's being played and then it's processing the sound and rendering the graphics in real time using Canvas to give you the effects that we can see here. And we can actually see this on the next example. Okay, so basically it's a feature called real-time audio analysis, where you see this on music players, where the music is playing in it and it shows you demonstrations. But if I start some music, as you can see, it's analyzing the music and processing the information and displaying it in the canvas in real time. So whether this is a recorded speech I can speak into a microphone, picks up that sound and then it renders it in real time, or whether it's a recorded music session. So I'm controlling the sound here. So yeah, a lot of fun. And move to the next one. Okay, now the Web Audio API is quite new. You'll have to check it with HTML5 just to see that it's support in browsers. But currently, I think it works in the latest version of Firefox and Chrome. but it's not as popular as the audio tone. Okay, so basically we had a look at file, graphics, and audio, and that's just some of them. There is a lot more that is available. So I'll just finish off by showing you this chart here. Which is HTML5 past, present, and future. We can see how it's evolved over time. Okay, and there's semantics, offline storage, device access, connectivity, multimedia, 3D and graphics, performance, and CSS3, and we've had a look at some of these. The uses of HTML5 is basically on the web and mobile. On the web, basically for cross-document messaging, WYSIWYG editable documents, which you can see this in Google Docs now. Drag and drop, HTML5 form features, SVG, which we had a look at as an example. Okay, 86% of this is when this was done, but it's a lot more now. 86% Google Chrome users can use it, and here's the rest. And HTML5 in mobile applications. You can use geolocation, basically using the GPS. You can use web storage, again 2D animations. Forms is a lot easier to do on mobile phones. And this is an interesting stat. A year ago, in 2011, 48% will use HTML5 when it's stable. This is talking about web developers. Okay, 3% said would never use HTML5, and 26% said will use HTML5 soon, and 23% are using it now. This was last year. Today, this research was done only a few weeks ago, actually about 2 weeks ago. 78% of web developers that were interviewed are now using HTML5. 22% will be using HTML5 soon, and there aren't any that said that won't be using it. And as you can see, it's becoming the norm, that you'd need to basically to be able to build a website to today's standards or tomorrow's standards, is it needs to be in HTML5. Okay, and we can see here some usage stats that 109 million users of smartphones in 2010. It's predicted in 2016 2.1 billion users. Okay, that's twice the size of China. Okay, and here's a couple of quotes. Steve Jobs said, HTML5 lets web developers create advanced graphics, typography, animation, transitions without relying on third-party browsers plug-in, for example, Flash. And one of the things that they showed is, if we go to apple.com/HTML5, and he showed a showcase of things that you can do with HTML5, and this was an example. Trailer, fully HTML5 video that you can control and scale up and down. Add a mask and add perspective if you need to. Okay, I think I'll leave it at that. We've got the rest of the session to basically Q&A. Any questions that you've got or anything that you want to share, then ask away. Thank you. Video in HTML5 is touchy subject because it's all about codec, problem is there isn't one browser. Well, the browsers are not deciding on. You're going back to the issue of like codecs. What I mean by that is there's different file formats. So you have WebM, you have H.264, and you have OGG Fiora. Just think of it like Betamax and VHS, or HD DVD and Blu-ray. One of them is going to win. So until the format has been decided, we don't know yet. Okay, but you basically you have one browser that supports all three, which is Google Chrome at the moment. But until they've decided, we don't know. So you have to offer all three formats until that time comes. Yeah.
Are you thinking about full accessibility since people are able to use HTML5?
What they've done is they've taken accessibility out of HTML5. So in HTML it wasn't there, and in XHTML they added accessibility. In HTML5 they removed it completely, which a lot of people in the accessibility community went up in arms and, what are you doing? You can't do that. What they developed, and if I just show you back, if we go over here, this spec has been around for a while now, but it's now part of the HTML5 group, and it's called YARIA. Where is it? Yeah, YARIA, which is the Web Accessibility Initiative. It's huge, it's massive, and it's a whole, I was reading it, and there's so much in it. There's actually more in it than HTML5. So if you use that with HTML5, yes, accessibility is 10 times better or 10 times bigger than it used to be.
It's basically improving it for everyone, and that means that
But yeah, the issue is that developers need to use YARIA to make sure that the website is accessible. If they don't, then it isn't. And it's all about awareness. And the YARIA specification, if I just show you, if we go to YARIA, that's the spec for it, and it's all laid out in just standard HTML, so you can read up all about it there. But it is actually quite detailed. There's a lot to it. Yeah.
Also, this work was really progressing explanation. I do think that there's one particular problem in terms of, as you know, that before it's in the front table, using Flash and
Yes.
running videos and such. Yes, but even right now, for example, I've had this experience for what quite some time, especially in Google Chrome, that after a certain period, let's say if you're running a video or you're watching it, after a certain time, the browsers create push to crash.
It basically depends on a lot of factors. Like for example, I used to get a lot of crashes on Google Chrome, but recently I haven't had any. And I was reading on a forum what one of the main reasons for Google Chrome crashing. There's a couple of reasons. Either the JavaScript was written badly, that caused an infinite loop that caused something to crash, or the other thing was actually what caused a lot of the crash was actually the Flash player. Flash player is not as streamlined on a Mac operating system as it is on Windows, so the crashes tend to happen more frequently. But since a lot less websites are using Flash, and I haven't noticed many browser crashes. And one of the specifications of using Chrome or building with Chrome is they work with 3 S's: speed, stability, and security. So they won't release a new version unless it's got all those 3 features. So I don't know on your experience, but I haven't had that many crashes with HTML5 video. Thanks. Yeah.
The acceleration or iteration in the browsers happening. Presumably you're then getting a massively increased fragmentation across the user base, with people on different versions of different browsers, and some people obviously are early adopters, and some people perhaps less so. Obviously, since it's an interpretive language, how do you account for the differences of developing on an ever-increasing fragmentation of the browser base?
It's difficult. We're hoping with the fact that what you do is you work to a test bed. So you build in terms of looking at how you can look at the core features in terms of what you need to deliver for the business project, or the core aspects in terms of what you need to do, and then add additional features depending on if this needs support that or that supports that. So you may end up having additional features for 20% of browser users, and for the rest of them don't have that. But like, for example, give you an example, if you look at images.google.co.uk, now if I visit this in most browsers, it'll work as normal, but in browsers that do understand this drag and drop feature, I can use it. So it's basically thinking of how you can offer the technologies but scale it across all different browsers, which needs a little bit of forward planning in terms of what you need to do in terms of designing features.
So you said then on this about capabilities of the platform.
Yeah, yeah.
So how is that different from a browser being able to use plugin or not being able to use plugin?
It's a different story, because if you look at it, how in the past you had to work in looking at supporting older browsers and supporting Flash. But again, if you look at Flash, for example, you had that same issue because you had different versions of Flash, and not everyone was on the latest version of Flash. But over time, people upgrade to the later versions. It's a pretty similar issue. Yeah, until we see that growth rate slow down, and eventually it will. It's unsustainable. You can't have that level of growth continuously. It will get to a point where it will stabilize. But until it does, we're just in that process of iteration. Okay, thanks. Yeah.
I'm a designer, and I've been focusing looking for HTML5 I was curious if you've done that specifically for design.
Yeah, we have courses for all, really. One of the courses that we do is basically we get a lot of designers that have never looked at HTML before, and we take it right from the beginning and work the way up. So there's a whole range of courses from beginner all the way up to super advanced. So it depends on your skill set. So also if you've never touched HTML before and you're a designer, then yeah, of course, start right at the beginning. Okay.
How do you think HTML5 can affect database building, websites, PHP, websites, just in terms of, of course, that's one of the things that affects a lot of websites in terms of the speed of,
Yeah, you'll always have database-driven sites because you can't survive without a large-scale database. Like, for example, Facebook wouldn't exist unless you have that huge database that's there. But even on a server side, things are changing. If you use PHP in its traditional way, it's a bit of a slow response. And you're seeing other technologies like Node.js, which is becoming very, very popular. Because it's taking these HTML5 technologies and putting it directly with that, but giving you the response in terms of what you can see. Let me just show you Node.js. Yes, this is Node.js, which is a platform built on Chrome's JavaScript engine that sits on the server. You could actually use this as an alternative to PHP. And companies have moved over. I was watching a YouTube video of LinkedIn. They're thinking of moving their whole platform onto Node.js, and they're doing it in phases. Their first phase is their mobile division is moving to Node.js, and then they'll roll out the rest of it. eBay have started using it, Microsoft have used it, and it's really growing. And actually, if you look at the demand, I was surprised how much demand that there is for Node.js. And it only came out like a few months ago. Well, these are all open source. Yeah, yeah, they're all open source. No, open source will always be there because the idea with open source. Well, yeah, you can use HTML with PHP, and you can use Node.js with MySQL. And a lot of people, I keep on getting asked the question: will Node.js kill off PHP? No, they'll live side by side because there's certain things that PHP is very good at, and there's a very big community with PHP developers that you can't just turn that off. and PHP in itself is evolving. Like for example, Facebook revolutionized in a way what PHP can do, to a point where PHP was, for an application like Facebook, was too slow. They took the PHP engine and rewrote a whole different SDK called Hip Hop, which takes PHP and C++ and combines the two to give you fast improved performance. So there's it changes things that are happening continuously in the PHP world or any kind of open source community. Even it doesn't have to be open source, but there has been a trend towards that open source inspires or brings in a lot of other community developers to push technology forward. So yeah, it's a growing platform, definitely. Yeah, thanks. Any more questions? Yeah.
So, you were talking about mobile app and how they're using HTML5.
Yes.
So in 3 years from now, given the majority of mobile apps, would you like to mobile apps where you can install offline?
Like an installable app from an app store. Yeah.
What percentage of the market wide do you think people will be using, will build these apps in HTML5?
It's difficult to say, but if we look back in history, the iPhone 1, when it was first released, Steve Jobs' idea was that there was no app store. He never envisioned that an app store would exist, that every app that was built would be a web app. The problem is the iPhone wasn't powerful enough, the browser was too immature, and developers didn't really understand the concept of building a web app. So it didn't really take off. So there was all this power in the iPhone, but yet you weren't able to use it. So when the iPhone 2 came out, that's when the App Store was released, because developers needed to access the graphics processing capabilities on the iPhone, and by doing so, that gave the birth of apps on the product. Now we're getting to a stage where the device is powerful enough for it to run apps on a browser. The browser is getting to a stage where it's becoming mature, and developers now understanding the focus of building a web app. And we're getting to that level of maturity. And until that market decides and sees this take off, we'll see a growth with it. And I've seen this on a few applications now, like Script and Pandora in the US, and a few other mobile or music-based sites allow you to access the application directly from a browser. And again, now you've got Google Chrome on those platforms, we'll probably see that working through. But it's difficult to say at this stage what will happen in 3 years. But it is moving towards that direction. Yeah.
I think it's also